There may be a power struggle developing in college football, not between Alabama and Georgia, and not between the SEC and the Big Ten, not between coaches and players, but between two competing visions of what college football should become. And standing right in the middle of that debate is Nick Saban. Now, before anybody rushes to the comment section, I'm not saying Nick Saban is at war with ESPN. What I am saying is that some of Saban's recent comments seem to run directly against the incentives driving modern college football. And that's fascinating because ESPN isn't just broadcasting college football, ESPN is helping to shape it. Meanwhile, Nick Saban increasingly sounds like a man warning that the sport is approaching a dangerous crossroads. The question is simple. Is Saban merely expressing concern, or is he becoming the leading voice for a completely different future? Sport has no adult in the room. Think about college football right now. Who's actually in charge? The NCAA? Not really. Every major legal challenge seems to reduce its authority. The conferences? Only within their own territories. The television networks? They influence everything but officially govern nothing. And the schools? And they're mostly looking out for themselves. The result is a sport that often feels like a family reunion where nobody remembers who was supposed to organize the event. Everybody has opinions, but nobody has control. And every year the chaos grows. Transfer portal battles, NIL disputes, conference realignment, revenue sharing, playoff expansion, state laws contradicting one another. Lawsuits arriving faster than recruiting commitments. The sport is generating billions of dollars while operating under rules that sometimes appear to have been written on a napkin. Saban's message. Listen carefully to what Nick Saban has been saying. His message isn't centered on Alabama. It's not even centered on winning. His focus is usually the same. Sustainability, structure, long-term stability. Those aren't the words of a coach trying to win next Saturday. Those are words of someone looking 10 years down the road. Saban seems worried that college football is becoming reactive instead of strategic. Every problem gets patched, but nothing gets solved. Eventually, those patches begin creating new problems, which creates tension. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, television. Television money has transformed college football. In many ways, for the better. Facilities improved, coaches' salaries exploded, athletic departments became financial powerhouses. Players now have opportunities they never had before, but television also has its own problems. More games, more inventory, more events, more content, and that's not criticism, that's business. The challenge is that what's best for a television schedule isn't always what's best for the sport itself. And that appears to be where Saban's concern begins. He keeps asking questions about the future. Questions that don't always align with endless expansion. Questions that don't always produce immediate profits. Questions that require someone to think beyond the next media contract. The commissioner question, which brings us to the most interesting possibility. What if college football finally decides it needs a commissioner? Not a symbolic figure, a real commissioner. Someone with authority. Someone capable of creating standards, someone capable of negotiating between conferences, someone capable of presenting one unified vision for the sport. If that conversation ever begins, who becomes the favorite? Nick Saban's name could immediately dominate the discussion, not because everyone agrees with him, but because everyone respects him. And those are two very different things. The Kirby Smart factor. Of course, if we're talking about influential voices, we can't ignore Kirby Smart. Kirby has quietly become one of the most important figures in modern college football. His opinions carry weight. Administrators listen. Other coaches listen. Media members listen. And unlike many coaches, Kirby often frames issues around the health of the sport rather than just Georgia's interest. And could he become a commissioner someday? Absolutely. The challenge is that Georgia probably wants him coaching for another decade. And if Georgia fans would likely stage a statewide protest if someone tried to take him away. And you got the Dabo Revisionist History Tour. Dabo Sweeney. A few years ago, many people rolled their eyes whenever Dabo criticized changes in the sport. And today, some of those criticisms don't sound quite so crazy. That's the funny thing about college football. Sometimes the people who look outdated end up looking prophetic. A commissioner isn't supposed to be popular every day. A commissioner is supposed to protect the sport from mistakes that won't become obvious until years later. And that job description fits Dabo better than many people would like to admit. And you got the Cignetti option. You have Curt Cignetti, the wild card, the chaos candidate, the guy who would probably answer every controversial question with whatever happened to be on his mind at that exact moment. Part of me thinks he'd be an incredible commissioner. Part of me thinks he'd be fired before Labor Day. Either way, the ratings would be spectacular. The SEC, the Big Ten, and the real power. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The commissioner question may not matter because the real power increasingly belongs to the SEC and the Big Ten. These two conferences generate enormous revenue. They attract the biggest audiences, they influence playoff discussions, they influence scheduling, and they influence the future. In many ways, college football is becoming less of a national organization and more of a partnership between two giant super conferences. And if a commissioner ever emerges, that person will need support from both. Otherwise, the position becomes meaningless. The big question, maybe Nick Saban has no interest whatsoever in becoming a commissioner. Maybe he genuinely just wants to help the sport avoid future problems. But every time he speaks, he sounds less like a retired coach and more like a statesman. Less like an analyst and more like a governor. More like someone looking at the entire map instead of one team. And whether that's intentional or not, it places him squarely in the center of the biggest question facing college football. Who's actually in charge? Because if the answer continues to be nobody, then eventually somebody will be. And when that day comes, don't be surprised if the first name mentioned is Nick Saban. What do you think? Do you think college football needs a commissioner? And if so, who gets your vote? Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Dabo Sweeney, Curt Cignetti, or someone completely outside of coaching? Put your answers in the comments, and remember, the next great battle in college football may not be fought on the field. It may be fought in boardrooms, conference offices, and television studios over one simple question. Who gets to decide the future of the sport?